With the declining nutrient density in our food, it's become increasingly difficult to eat a truly balanced and nutritious diet. But our guest today is here to change that. He's one of the nation's leading organic food experts, called an organic sensation by the New York Times, and is on a mission to establish a truly clean organic lifestyle for all. This is the story of Organic Insider with Max Goldberg. Max, so happy to have you on the show.
Casper, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about organic.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot to talk about here, and there's a ton of confusion in it. But I want to start with, of course, your story, because you're not the, I think, normal person you think of that just gets into organic food and talks about, because you have a little bit different background, somewhat similar. I mean, I come from a finance background, but tell the audience, where you started, what really brought you into this field, why you're so passionate about it.
The journey really started in 2001. I spent right after college, I worked on Wall Street in investment banking, got my MBA at Columbia, and was in the finance and technology world. In 2001, I had a sort of a real life-changing event. Was this woman I was dating at the time? We went to go visit her in New Mexico. We went to go visit her naturopath in New Mexico, and I was there and I was like, what's the deal with organic food? And she's like, don't we need the chemicals to kill all the bugs? And she's like, no, we don't need the chemicals to kill all the bugs. And then I left that trip and went back to New York and did research. And really, ever since that day, I've been eating, or since I got back to New York and really started researching, I've been eating close to 100% organic since that time. And I had started making some real changes in my life a few years earlier. I quit drinking in 1999. I quit cigarettes in 2000. In the summer of 2001, I quit antidepressants. I was on antidepressants for close to 11 years. And that was one of the reasons that I quit the medication, was because I found organic food. Here I was running around New York City looking for food that didn't have chemicals. I was popping a chemical into my mouth each morning. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And I just knew in my bones, I'm like, I don't ever foresee giving up organic food ever. I was like, I just don't see it. And then, and several years later in 2004, I quit smoking pot. So I've been free of everything for decades, never relapsed once on any of them. And it was around that time I really started making changes, and organic for whatever reason really spoke to me. And I was like, it was at that time, it was really about my health, about not putting the GMOs and the toxic chemicals into my body. But as I later got into it, and when I started writing about the industry in end of 2009 and beginning of 2010, and became more of an activist in the movement, it became more than just what I'm putting into my own body. What we decide to eat and how we purchase our food at supermarkets, at the restaurants, wherever, is a real political statement. And for me, it's about protecting the farmers so that they don't have to get exposed to these super toxic chemicals. These are people we don't hear about, who are completely marginalized, have no representation, and people don't really think much about. So every time we buy organic, that means some farmer is not exposed to these toxic chemicals. So it just really spoke to me early on. And in 2001, I didn't think I was going to have a career out of it. I didn't even know there were organic trade shows. And then 2009, that's when blogging started to take off. And someone said, oh yeah, I was in Boston at the time, and someone said that there's this organic trade show happening right now. And I literally called up. I got the woman who ran the press room, her number. I called her up. I told her who I was. I said, I don't have a website, I don't have business cards, I don't have anything, but can I come to the show? I'm just launching a site. She's like, sure, come on down. And that was really the start of it.
No, listen, I always say food is medicine. It can heal in some ways, but there is the polarity to it. Food can be, disease ridden, basically lead you into a path of disease. So for you to get off into a to go down this route and find it that way is really interesting. And I find it also very interesting that we're even using the word organic before food, because 100 years ago we wouldn't even need to use that, because everything was organic from nature, not and not ridden with chemicals and everything else. But we are where we are today. We created a little bit of a monster in many ways with GMO, and pesticides and glyphosate, everything else, but there's still tons of confusion. I mean, you're an expert in this. What do people need to know about just the term organic in general when it's applied to food?
Well, it is a term that's regulated by the U.S. government. So what you want to do is you want to look for, so if people like don't know what organic is, you go into the store and you look for the organic seal, USDA organic seal. It's round, oftentimes it's green, and you look for that on the product. And so companies cannot just slap the word organic onto a product. I hear all the time, oh, they're just saying it's organic. I mean, there's no question that there are problems with organic, and we can get into that later on. But it is illegal for companies to just slap on the word, or an organic product unless you are, under $5,000 in sales. But in general, it is illegal to do that. So this is regulated. There are laws, there are enforcements. There's a third party certifier that brands need to get to come in and validate that their product is in fact organic. So this is a regulated term, overseen by the U.S. government.
Now, at the same time, I do feel there's still confusion around, let's say, non-GMO versus biodynamic, sustainable, all these different terms around, almost like eggs, right? There's cage-free, pasteurized, all these other ways. But what exactly do you look? Are you looking directly for that seal when you go into any place to shop and you want the highest quality organic food, or let's even go beyond that and say produce? Because I really want to hit on what people are kind of taking home to cook with, and vegetables and fruits. Is there something we, like, as consumers, should be looking at or fearful of when we see?
I mean, you want to look for the USDA organic seal. That is the baseline. When you're shopping at a supermarket, that's what you want to look for. So there's something else. So number one, you want to look for the USDA organic seal. I mean, that is widely accepted, $62 billion industry. So that's what you want to look for. If you're going to a farmer's market, there are a lot of farmers who refuse to get certified or drop their certification. That doesn't mean that you should necessarily not buy from them, but what you want to do is you want to say, do you use chemicals? Do you spray? And they say, well, we do. I've been to plenty of farmers markets where they're very honest and they tell you. Now, there might be some people that are not as honest, but a lot of these farmers will tell you. So you want to, they may say, hey, we do everything, or we're beyond organic. We just don't. We have an aversion to the U.S. government, to the USDA's National Organic Program. But in the market, I look for the organic seal. That is a baseline.
And is the organic seal also that you can't use artificial fertilizers? Is that part of it? Like, how far does it go as far as chemicals versus artificial versus truly, let's say, a very biodynamic and natural type of approach to farming?
Yeah, no synthetic fertilizers, no super toxic pesticides, no GMOs, no irradiation, no sewage sludge, which is used on conventional food. So you're really getting, a lot of the big things are removed. That being said, you mentioned non-GMO before. Well, why? A lot of people think because GMO is such a buzzword, they say, oh, well, this is non-GMO, it's okay. Well, no, it's not okay, because non-GMO only means non-GMO, and that's if it's verified by a third-party certifier like the Non-GMO Project, which has the I think it's the butterfly in the logo. I'm sure you've seen it. But non-GMO does not mean free of glyphosate, atrazine, all of the super toxic chemicals. So if someone says, "Oh, this is fine, it's non-GMO," it's like, no, it's not fine that it's non-GMO. It means no GMOs, but it doesn't mean all of the other super toxic chemicals.
So you have this ability to have someone actually labeling it, going in, seeing that's organic, add that USDA, sticker onto it. Where therein are the regulatory failures of what's going on right now in the organic food world?
Where are the failures in organic?
Yes.
Okay, there's several. Number one, one of the big controversies that I write about all the time in my newsletter in Organic Insider is hydroponics in organic. So what is hydroponics? Hydroponics is growing plants in essentially water. Now, hydroponics violates Section 6513 of the Organic Foods Production Act. And what does all this mean? It means that in the organic rules passed by Congress in 1990, it said farmers have to have a management plan that fosters soil fertility. Growing plants in a bucket of water does not foster soil fertility and is a complete violation of the organic rules. However, lobbyists, trade groups have been able to somehow manipulate the system, confuse regulators. Now, a majority of the tomatoes sold nationally are hydroponic, the organic ones. A lot of the berries and an increasing number of the greens. And what does this mean? When we buy organic, we want stuff that is grown in the soil. That's, as you know, nutrition starts in the soil. And so when you're eating, these fruits and vegetables that are grown hydroponically, you're not getting that nutrition from the soil, and all of the billions and billions of biota from the soil, all the organisms from the soil. So that's number one, is that a lot of people are buying organic hydroponic that is not, these are products that are not grown in the soil and violate the Organic Foods Production Act. And there are lawsuits going on with this. So far, we have not been successful for whatever reason. So that's number one. Number two is around organic factory farms, dairy farms, egg farms. There was a big investigation in 2017 that the Washington Post did, and they exposed this massive organic dairy farm where the animals, apparently were not going outside. They measured the omega-3 levels, and they were comparable to conventional milk. The USDA is not cracking down on these factory farms at all. And this is a real problem, because a lot of people think, oh, we'll go to the big box store, and I hear this all the time. Oh, we got our organic milk for $3. It was so cheap. Like, well, you're getting what you pay for. Most people don't understand it, but you're getting what you pay for, even if it has the organic seal. Just because it has the organic seal does not mean that all products are the same. Like, all organic milk is not the same at all. There is a massive difference in quality. There's a nonprofit group called the Cornucopia Institute. They put out all these different scorecards of organic products, rating the best to the worst, because there's such a discrepancy in practices of production. So hydroponics, that's a big one. Organic factory farms. And the other big controversy has been fraudulent organic imported grains. Pre-war from Turkey and Ukraine. Again, Washington Post did a massive investigation about this, and that these are the grains. It's crazy to think in the US, we have to import organic corn and soy because we do not have enough grown in the US to meet our needs. With all of the farmland we have in the US and all of the GMO corn and soy that we grow in the US, we do not have enough supply in the US to meet our domestic needs. So we have to import it, and there have been massive problems with fraud. Again, the Washington Post did a big investigation of this in 2017, exposing all this. And the USDA just passed a few weeks ago something called the Strengthening Organic Enforcement Rule. It's gonna tighten things up, but at the end of the day, there has to be a will from the USDA to really want to crack down, regardless of whatever rule is in place.
Yeah, no, it's kind of frightening that there is basically no kind of non-GMO organic corn, soy, all these other things are kind of going away, it seems like, at least from the US standpoint. And then comes the argument that, well, organic is very nice, but it's not sustainable and scalable for the mass population and our earth right now. What would be your counter argument to that?
I think that's all propaganda. What people need to really understand is, when you see all these negative articles in the press about organic is worse for the environment, organic can't feed the world, this is pure propaganda, a very orchestrated and calculated campaign to discredit organic, period. Organic is a major threat to the chemical and GMO companies. And what people need to understand is the people selling the GMOs are the same people selling the chemicals to the farmers. They're the same. They're not different. They're the same. They're selling the farmers the GMO seeds. It's the razor and the razor blade analogy. They're selling them the seeds, and you got to buy glyphosate or whatever the chemical is to spray on those GMO seeds. So this narrative that organic can't feed the world, the majority of the farmers in the world are these small farmers. They're not these industrial farmers. It is all propaganda, and people should not believe it. I mean, what is going to be better for the world? Organic, chemical free farming, or a farming method that enriches major international conglomerates with their patent protected seeds, with their glyphosate, which is the most widely used chemical in the world, is known as a probable called a probable carcinogen by the World Health Organization. This is sprayed everywhere. There's been massive backlash, the lawsuits and backlash against it. Is that really better for the world, that we should be spraying this toxic chemical on our farms and on our schools, and it gets into the water and the air? The backlash against organic, everyone needs to take it with a grain of salt, and there is a very orchestrated campaign to discredit organic.
It is a huge propaganda piece, and it is a huge amount of lobbying that goes in, and deception in a sense. And I think some people are seeing through, although some, are part of the confused, I think, majority that still have a hard time understanding, the whole idea about, cows being dangerous to our environment, and to, methane gas being kind of taxed in New Zealand. There's so much going on, and I think this climate change and eco warrior type of environment. But how concerned are you about things like Bill Gates buying up a lot of farmland in the US, and again, that level of propaganda now almost going to this feverish pitch?
Yeah, it's a real concern, because he totally, interestingly, he has an investment. He invested in a company, an organic milk company called Neutral Foods, and it's a carbon neutral milk company. But he is very pro GMO. There's no way around it. So him buying up all this farmland, it's a real concern, because getting young farmers into organic is a problem, because farmland has become so expensive. And also the other thing that's really challenging in organic when it comes to the farmers is in the dairy sector, is that because the USDA has allowed all these organic factory dairy farms to proliferate, it's artificially pushed the price down of organic milk. And these small organic farmers in New England and all over the country, they can't compete, and they're going out of business quickly. And it is very scary, because not only for their financial well-being, these are people, salt of the earth people that have been doing this for decades. The organic industry was built on the backs of small organic farmers. This was a movement back then. This was not an industry. This was a movement. These people were going out of business, losing their livelihood. And the other thing that's doing, and if we can circle back to the hydroponics, we as consumers are losing choice at the supermarket. When you want to go to the supermarket and buy an organic tomato grown in nutrient-rich soil, that's becoming very difficult, and will soon be next to impossible if we keep going at this rate. And berries and greens, so it's going to be increasingly more difficult to find this in the supermarket. Same with organic milk, from cows at small organic grass-fed dairies around the country. It's going to be harder and harder, and we as consumers are going to lose choice when we go to the supermarket, and that is another real danger.
I was once at an event focused on making food more accessible, good quality food more accessible. I remember Elon Musk's brother was there talking about, the cost of a lot of what we're doing, especially with produce, is shipping it all over the world, and it's not good for the environment. Of course, when you get things from Argentina shipped up to New York when it's out of season, and his whole idea was to build locally kind of greenhouses around that. I don't know if it was actually the hydroponics. Maybe a little bit about this. Is there any viability to creating kind of local greenhouses where most of the stores in that area would then give those vegetables, fruits, basically over to that in a controlled environment, not in a real environment? And I heard a counter debate from a chef there, actually, but I want to hear your opinion on this idea.
Yeah, Kimball Musk is a big hydroponics advocate, and I'm not against hydroponics per se. I'm against hydroponics in organic. I'm against being called organic. So yes, I believe that eventually things are going more local. But this all requires capital, and you see some of these big companies. There's one a conventional company, I believe it's App Harvest. They went public. They did a SPAC, and I think they're not organic, but they're growing in greenhouses. I believe it might be hydroponic. I'm not 100% sure, but they're having a lot of trouble. But I do think that things ultimately are going to become a lot more local by necessity. And we saw it during COVID where people started, buying a lot more from their local farmers. So I do think we are going to move in that direction. And I think we should move in that direction. I think that if we can buy organic fruits and vegetables that are in season locally, that's better than shipping something from around the world. Now, I am all for supporting farmers from around the world. I mean, we just can't grow coffee in New England or bananas. So yes, some of these foods are going to come from, or coconuts are going to come from different parts of the world. But I think we are definitely moving in that direction. It's just a matter of financially, how does that happen?
Right. And there are other concerns. I know you mentioned this right before you jumped on, this idea of GMO 2.0. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard of this. To most people, it's either GMO, non-GMO. That's what we look at. But there's something new to this.
Yeah, there was sort of the first generation of GMOs, the genetically engineered corn and soy that are in all the processed food products. And now there's a whole new generation of GMOs where this is becoming they're creating products out of this single GMO. They're genetically engineering, creating these novel genetically engineered proteins. And so you're seeing it with the animal-free whey protein using synthetic biology, and all they're using the terms they're using is synthetic biology and precision fermentation, lab-grown meat. I mean, these are the products that we're starting to see more and more of. And Dr. Michael Hansen at Consumer Reports, he has a quote quoted in one of my newsletters. He said, all these companies are using these fancy terms because they're trying to confuse consumers. All this is genetic engineering. So these are all these new companies that are getting funded by Silicon Valley, and all it is sort of the next generation of genetic engineering. And people do not know what they're eating. I mean, these are novel proteins that have never been in the human food supply before. And they are really attracting a ton of money. Celebrities are investing. And what they do is they sell everyone on the sustainability story. And what they don't tell you is how they can't tell you how safe it is because they've never been around. There's no history of this in the food supply.
Yeah. It's a scary time in general. I think our whole food industry, where we actually get our food, is completely being manipulated, controlled, and turned into sort of a toxic, where people don't really know what they're ingesting anymore. And that's a huge concern, I think, because it's the one thing that nourishes us is food. It's always been like medicine, and in this case, it's becoming the thing that's causing the most diabetes, heart disease, everything else. Can you make a case? Because I know a lot of people listening go off of cost. They look as food as, yes, it's something I eat, but it's cheaper. It looks exactly the same. And I heard people saying it's the same nutrient density, everything else. Can you make that case of why people should dish out a little bit more for organic, even beyond, let's say, the story of the farmer, regenerative ecosystem, purely on a health basis? What would be that case?
Well, if you look at the studies that have been done, organic has higher levels of omega-3s. When in milk, they have higher levels of antioxidants and polyphenols. They've done studies with tomatoes and ketchup and onions. I mean, there are so many studies that show higher level of antioxidants and those types of compounds. So that's number one. And number two is, you're getting what you pay for. As we talked about at the beginning about food being medicine, why would you want to put anything but the best into your body? I know cost is an issue, and some people will say, listen, I just can't afford it. Okay, that's totally understandable. And then when you're spending $10,000 to go on this, 3-day weekend in the Caribbean, everyone's got to make a decision about how they want to spend their money. And some people don't want to spend it on food. We have been ingrained, it's been instilled into us from a very early age that food is supposed to be cheap.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be, it's supposed to be cheap. And that is the problem, is culturally people have this idea that you're not supposed to pay a lot for food. And that has really not served us well, because food that is grown well with care and love and grown responsibly, grown and that is grown well by a farmer who really takes a lot of care, that is not an inexpensive process. So I think people need to shift their thinking about, cheap food, and that you're getting what you pay for, even in organic. When you go to the big box store and you get the absolute cheapest thing you can find that is organic, trust me, you're getting what you pay for. You're not getting the same product, milk, for example, that you're getting at a small organic, grass-fed farm. You're just not. So it ultimately comes down to, what are your values? What do you prioritize? And I understand organic can be more expensive, but there are ways to do it that can help offset those costs. But ultimately, it comes down to prioritizing, really healthy food. And the other thing is, when you say, I'm not going to buy organic, I'm going to buy conventional, every time you do that, you're enriching the GMO and pesticide companies. That is why I do not go out to the trendy restaurants, because I do not want my money going to these people.
So you're saying most trendy restaurants are using GMO foods, or
absolutely GMO
absolutely,
canola oil.
I know.
Yeah.
It's a sad fact that, so many of these places that pride themselves on quality don't start with a quality ingredient. It's almost like a modified thing that tastes good, I guess, in the end, but it's starting with, subpar ingredients, which, again, people don't know this, and they just assume that it's a very, high quality product.
Some high-end restaurants, maybe they're using organic chicken, or maybe they're using some organic grains. I'm not saying all aren't, but it's very hard to find organic food at restaurants. And now you can find certain things, but it's very hard to find organic restaurants that are really doing it legit, that are doing it the right way. But when you go to most restaurants, almost all of them, they're using GMOs, and you might not know it. It's probably in their oils, or it's probably, in their corn, or if not, if it's even if it's not GMO, even if it's conventional, most likely you're eating food that's been sprayed with glyphosate.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways, these things can enter our bodies, but we usually don't think the Michelin star restaurant is one of them, when it absolutely can be. Let me ask you, what are your thoughts on Whole Foods, of just trying to shop there organically? Is that something you're, still behind after everything Amazon purchased it? There's been saying that, a lot of their produce now is non-organic, or, it's kind of deceiving to people, but what are your thoughts on it?
Listen, I support Whole Foods and what they're doing, and I think actually some of the stores are better run now that Amazon owns them. There was a lot of talk in the beginning that they were going to kill local products, and that everything was going to be centralized out of Texas, but there are a lot of local products still. So I think by and large, they've done a good job. When people say, well, all their produce is conventional, that's not true. And you can go and buy the produce that is organic. Now, if you go to some of the salad bars and prepared foods, I would say, I haven't gone there lately and purchased that, but in a lot of the stores, you're not going to find a lot of organic in the prepared food section. But by and large, I go to Whole Foods all the time, and overall, I'm supportive of what they're doing.
No, I was a fan also, especially John Mackey. When it was early on days, it was a great idea to do that, and it just blossomed. And then Amazon took over, and always there are concerns when a very large corporation like that you're going to cut corners and everything else. But it's yet to be seen. You're saying it's good. I mean, I believe that wholeheartedly. What about the idea of add-on labels? I know that's something that is something to consider when looking at organic. Your thoughts?
Add-on labels are very important. So let's explain what add-on labels are. So when you go to the market and you see the organic seal, you probably see on almost every product, you're going to see a lot of seals at the bottom, right?
You do.
So let's talk about add-on labels for organic. There are many of them, but there are two that are really important. And while you're listening to the two of us talk about organic, you might feel this is a doom and gloom scenario, and it's not. There's actually some really, really good things going on in the organic movement, and that there are very committed people trying to reverse things, trying to really save the organic food system. There's two add-on labels. One is called Regenerative Organic Certified, and the second one is called Real Organic Project. And so these are labels that essentially sit on top of the organic seal. So to get one of these two certifications, you have to have USDA organic as the baseline, and then there's a separate qualification to get one of those two add-on labels, Real Organic Project or Regenerative Organic Certified. So let me explain what each of these are. So essentially, both of these certifications were born out of frustration with the USDA, of the USDA not doing its job, and also a desire to raise the bar for what organic represents. USDA Organic Seal is no longer the gold standard in organic. The gold standard is Regenerative Organic Certified, and it is it was started by three entities: Dr. Bronner's, the soap company, Patagonia, and Rodale Institute. Rodale Institute is in Pennsylvania, and it's a nonprofit. Is where the organic food movement was started in the 1940s by J.I. Rodale. So these three organizations started the Regenerative Organic Certified label. So there are three pillars: soil health, social welfare, and animal welfare. So it's worker welfare, animal welfare, and soil health. Those are the three pillars. So they're raising the bar in those three areas. So people have to be paid a certain amount, minimum amount. They test the soil, and there are no factory animal farms. The second label was really started by a lot of small organic family farmers in New England, because they were so fed up about this hydroponics issue, because this hydroponics and organic is driving a lot of these soil-grown small organic farmers completely out of business. So they said, we just can't win anymore. They tried for years and years and years to lobby the USDA, to lobby the National Organic Standards Board, which is the 15-member board that makes recommendations to the USDA about organic ingredients, processes, things like that. So they said, we have to do something because we are losing, our peers are losing their livelihoods. They started something called the Real Organic Project, and that is an add-on label. They have certified about over 1,000 farms throughout the U.S., and that means no hydroponics, no factory farms, no factory organic dairy farms or egg farms. And the third thing is no split farms. So you can't have half your farm be conventional, half your farm be organic. So essentially, if you can go now, the Real Organic Project, I know this might be getting a little in the weeds for people, but these are really important labels, and you're going to be seeing a lot more of these labels on the supermarket. Real Organic Project has it has only been certifying farms up until this point. So you could find a handful of tomatoes, you can find some other, one ingredient products, fruits and vegetables and meats, things like that. ROC, Regenerative Organic Certified. Dr. Bronner's has a coconut oil that's ROC certified. Nature's Path has an oatmeal that's ROC certified. There's a company called Simply. They're doing ROC quinoa. So you're seeing Lotus Foods has an ROC rice. You're seeing more and more, and I'm not naming all of them. There's plenty of them. You can go on the ROC website. I'm sure we can put links to it after. But this is, if you can find, and Real Organic Project is very difficult to find right now, but they just signed a partnership with this German company called Naturland, which certifies, I think, 140,000 farmers around the world. So Real Organic Project is coming to consumers. It probably will really start to hit later this year and in 2024. So if you can find an organic product that's ROC certified or ROP certified, that's what you want to look for. Now let's talk about some of the other add-on labels. Non-GMO project verified. That's another add-on label where they actually go out and test high-risk ingredients like corn, canola. I think they are testing now potatoes, because GMO potatoes that don't bruise, those are really out there. So they're testing the high-risk products. There's a certification that I'm involved with called the glyphosate residue-free certification. So if you're concerned with glyphosate, which everyone should be, even if you're buying organic food, an increasing number of organic brands are getting this glyphosate residue-free certification, because glyphosate has even contaminated the organic food supply. It's not, even though it's prohibited from being sprayed on organic food, it has contaminated our organic food supply, which is infuriating, because we're buying organic, so it doesn't have these chemicals. So that you can go on their website and you can see all the brands. And really, what I would say for consumers is, consumers should be demanding. You should be contacting every organic brand that you buy from and say, I want to know your testing results. I want to see that you've tested that it's free of glyphosate. And if they say, yeah, we've tested, it's free, say, I want you to post it on your website. It's not good enough for you to tell me. I want to see the results. There's a company out there called Zego Foods, Z-E-G-O. The founder does more testing than anyone I've ever met. She tests for over 400 chemicals in every single product that she has. And she posts her website, posts the results on her website. This, as consumers, is what we have to be demanding from organic brands is, we want you to test and we want you to post the results on your website and get glyphosate residue-free certified at a minimum. So as consumers, we need to be pressuring organic brands to do this. Otherwise, they won't do it.
Is it going to be prohibitive to the small organic brands that are just starting up, or smaller farms or anything, from a cost perspective, to do all of this?
Yeah, it is going to add an extra cost to the brands, but I think it's a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
So if a brand says, hey, we've done this testing, it's going to really, set them apart from most other brands. So I see it as a very important selling point. I don't think it's going to break the bank to get, like a glyphosate residue-free certification. It is an extra cost, but I think it can be sold. I know Zego Foods, when COVID hit, her business exploded, because doctors knew we have to get the cleanest, purest food, and this is why. Right. Because this, Colleen, the founder, she's testing for 400 chemicals.
Yeah. No, you have a lot of this hope within this region to, continuously improve. And you see that there are all these new labels and everything, but still, are there things that you yourself, even if organic, are not going to eat certain foods?
Well, here's what I would say is, there are foods that I will be very cautious of unless I know that they've done their testing. Because I'm involved in this glyphosate residue-free certification. From the very get-go, I've been, I've gotten an inside look about what's going on. Pea protein, lentils, chickpeas, those are really some of the ones that, unless I know that they're certified, I'm very leery about buying those products at the market. Those are the high risk ones, the legumes, particularly. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. You always got to be cautious in many ways. And that's why I'm actually very happy to hear there are these certifications, because otherwise, again, you have no clue. You could say organic, but still, like you said, glyphosate could end up on it. And that's never a good thing for people, especially when we're already in a sick and toxic environment.
Yeah, and Casper, the big thing that's coming up now, and I wrote about it last year, is the PFAS chemicals, the forever chemicals. And I'm sure you know about. They're in the nonstick pans, they're in the couches, and they're that is showing up in organic. I mean, that's going to be everywhere, and that's not a problem. That's not just unique to organic. It's going to be conventional, and that showed up last year in farms in Maine. And then about a month ago, it showed up in organic eggs in Denmark. And so this is a real problem that's coming. And I don't think people have any idea what is ahead of us with this PFAS problem. There is no PFAS certification, PFAS free certification. I've been hearing grumblings about it. I've been hearing that it's kind of in the works, but I haven't seen anything yet. And that is going to be the next big certification. So that's something that brands are totally in the dark about. And that's something we're going to have to ask them about soon, about testing for these things. But it's not as simple as testing for glyphosate. It's much more complex.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, you look at how many chemicals are out there. Now you look at this thing in East Palestine and, what that's going to do. What are your thoughts on that? These kind of, toxic spills, explosions happening all over the country in many ways. And I'm sure it has always happened, but it seems at a larger scale. There's a huge belt of agriculture in that area in general in Ohio, if you go a little bit west from there. But what are your thoughts on all of these kind of chemical and toxic spills that are getting into the environment, into the soil, into the waterways?
Well, we live in a very toxic world where these chemical companies have incredible power.
Yeah.
And it's so unfortunate what happened in Ohio, but we're being exposed to all these chemicals that we have absolutely no say about. And the chemicals companies have a massive power, and the oversight of these chemicals is minimal. And it's, we've got to elect people. There's, two things. We've got to elect politicians who want to do something about it, right, and who want to fight back and want to make organic food a priority. And I know this is a bigger thing, but we've got to get, campaign finance has to be reformed. Mm-hmm. When corporations are funding all these politicians to get into office, these politicians have to pay them back. Yeah. So for us to really make a dent, these campaigns all have to be publicly funded for us to get a real handle on all these different chemicals in our environment and have a real crackdown. Otherwise, the politicians, they get in there and they some of them may have good intentions, but it just doesn't happen. The majority of the politicians are just controlled by the corporations, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, you learn about these connections with everything in the Norfolk South. That was responsible for the one in Ohio was, giving donations to DeWine and others in Ohio. And basically, they're going to get a free pass at this, and this will continue to happen. And as it continues to happen, we are the ones that get burdened with it. So I think it's really important if people say, well, we're helpless, to understand you do have some power. Is that something you talk about also in the LinkedIn group, the organic food industry that you basically run? It's become this huge, 40,000 members now for around the world?
Yeah, we I talk about it everywhere. The organic food industry group, we used to have meetups at Expo West many years, and it was great. But yes, I consider myself an activist journalist, and activism is, the reason I continue doing this, because people need to know what's going on. They need to be involved. And if they're listening to this today, hopefully they'll leave and get more involved. Saying that I'm going to the farmer's market, I'm buying organic, I'm doing that's just not enough. People need to be involved. They need to call their politicians. They need to join, get on the mailing list of the important organic nonprofits and really get involved.
Yeah, it's really so important. We can't sit on the sidelines anymore. You can't just sit there and a few actions won't really turn things around. I think we've seen it, how quickly things can accelerate, especially in modern times, to a point where, it's beyond where it's controllable, in a sense where I think we're reaching that tipping point. So it's incredibly important to be active, such as yourself, and get involved with these groups like yours. Now, you also have a book coming out this year. Can you talk a little bit about that, what that's all about? It's a memoir, I understand. So
it is a memoir. It is not an organic food book. I was on antidepressants for almost 11 years, and I went off in the summer of 2001. It took me 3.5 years to recover. I was suicidal. So it talks about before, during, and after the antidepressants, and just about my journey, and what happened, and it was a the defining moment in my life when I decided to go off, because I took the pills for close to 11 years,
Mm.
and it numbed me. They numbed me emotionally. I was never super happy, never depressed. And so what I started to do was drinking. I drank a lot because when I was drunk, I felt alive. And I developed a very bad drinking habit, and put me in a lot of very precarious situations. And I eventually quit in 1999. And so the book talks about before, during, and after the antidepressants.
Yeah, I mean, this is a subject that, being in medicine, it's a very important one, because now you see, the idea of putting children on antidepressants, the idea of anyone with any kind of, any level of anxiety, panic, anything, in a day and age where we all have some, I think, where it's kind of put onto us. We have fear all around us being bred up and kind of pushed onto us. And then the answer for most of medicine is go on an antidepressant or go on a medication of some sort, anti-anxiety medication. What would be your advice for someone that is feeling, hey, I am depressed and my doctor is telling me, and what would be the advice to them?
I don't tell people what to do with their medication. It's an individual, it's a choice that everyone needs to make. For me, I wanted to live a more natural lifestyle. I didn't want my happiness to be to depend on a pill. And I remember vividly, I woke up one day, and when I was deciding whether to go off or on, and I said, or to go off or to stay on them, I said, how is it that I was born? And it's a miracle that we're all born, right? So how is it that this miracle happened, that I was born, and the only way that I can get through life is from a chemical, from a pill made in a made in some manufacturing facility off the highway somewhere. That's the only way that I can get through life. I said, no way. But I think people really need to ask themselves, what do they want? What do they want in life, and how do they want to live? And it's up to everyone to decide how they want to live, and in what way. And it's not for me to tell people what to do. My book is not a how-to. It's just my story. But I wanted to live with more natural, more holistic and natural lifestyle. And a few of the things that have been really critical for me have been, number one, and I didn't realize it at the time when I went on them, it was probably, seasonal depression. I went to college in Providence, Rhode Island, and grew up in New England. And, in New England, it gets dark at 4 or 5 o'clock in the winter.
Yeah.
And I'm very sensitive to sunlight, and I need a lot of sunlight. And so sunlight is a big deal for me. And number two is sugar. I didn't really understand the role that sugar played. And I eat very, very, almost zero refined sugar right now. And then just, I've been a long time meditator. I started meditating in 1991, and that has certainly helped. But really, I also had to quit everything. I quit the drinking and the drugs and the cigarettes and everything. And it's really coming to terms with not running away. Mm-hmm. So, so it was a combination of all those things.
Yeah, I think it's really important what you said there, is to sit and ask yourself real questions, and you have to answer them, right? Not let a doctor answer them, not let other people say, I feel great on it, or whatever it is. You need to sit there and ask. Right before I got on this, recording, I was talking with an ex-Navy SEAL on a previous recording, and he was also suffering after he got out of the SEALs. He didn't know what to do with himself. He had all this structure there, and it wasn't in the real world. And he turned into depression, he turned to alcohol, all these other things. It just came to that rock bottom point where he had to actually ask himself, like, what am I doing? What makes me happy? How can I was happy before, right? How do you get that back? And again, it's not because you're lacking some chemical, as you said. It's not that. And I think there are so many options now that you could try: the meditation, organic food, eating this way, whatever it may be, sleeping more, changing your environment, as you said, sunlight, nature, that make that your last resort in a way. It's there. It's almost like a fallback. And maybe you could do it for a short period of time also. I've heard that too, where people are super depressed over something, a serious trauma, and for a month or so they used it, because I believe that's how pharmaceuticals should be. They should be the crutch until you could heal, and then you're off. But the pharmaceutical company wants you for as a lifelong customer and hooked, addicted. So
Yeah.
did you find that though? Did you find that there was an addiction at the end that was truly to the antidepressants?
I don't think it was an addiction to the
Okay.
antidepressants. I just don't think I was on them for close to 11 years and just kept taking them and taking them and taking them. I didn't even really give it much thought. So I
Right.
was kind of on the treadmill and didn't even, you know, there was an incident that happened and it forced me to re-examine why I was on them. And so I really never gave it much thought. I was just taking them. I was like, oh, I have to take them. And that was sort of it. I just accepted it. And I was told I had a chemical imbalance and it wasn't my fault. And that was it. So, Casper, what I think a lot of younger people don't realize is, um, when I went on them in college, this was, 1990, there was no Google. There was no chat GPT. You couldn't research this stuff easily. Now, I mean, you can go online and search all the natural methods and you can find everything in minutes. Back then, there was nothing. So today, we have the access to information is so different. It is such a different time. I didn't have access to any of that stuff back then. And also, health and wellness was not part of the cultural zeitgeist like it is today, where it's when I went organic in 2001, I mean, I was ostracized. No one was eating organic back then. I mean, yes, you could go find it at the stores, but I mean, my friends and my family thought it was, like crazy.
Yeah.
They thought it was nonsense. No one says that anymore, but that's what it was back then. So I think we've got the information that we have access to now is just night and day, and that if people want a different way, there's plenty of information out there that's easily accessible to them.
Absolutely. It's an incredible time we live in where you could have access to that. And I understand there's the flip side of it that too can become an addiction and a negative thing with social media, with technology and everything. But information is a beautiful thing. And if you want to jump down rabbit holes about organic food, about how to get happier and everything, there is an abundance of good information too out there. And you just have to sift through, but you got to do, the work yourself. And through organizations like yours, through your work, it's becoming easier and easier. So thank you for all that you do. When is the book available, and where can people learn more about you?
Later this year, it'll be, I don't have a time yet. They can find me at organicinsider.com and livingmaxwell.com. But the majority of my time right now is spent in Organic Insider. It goes out every 2 weeks. Anyone can sign up. It's free. It's a freemium model, so it's free for everyone. There's paid model, and that's how they can find me, and at Living Maxwell on Instagram. And I really appreciate Casper, you having me on, giving me an opportunity to talk about what is going on in the organic food world. And there are a lot of problems, but there's a lot of hope, particularly with this Regenerative Organic Certified and the Real Organic Project. I'm close with both organizations, and I can tell people that there's some very committed people really trying to do the right thing and trying to, save our food supply.
No, it's a really, really benevolent mission, and it's so damn important, I have to say. Max, thank you so much. Really quickly before you go, how's your tennis game these days?
I started playing competitively when I was 8, and I played in college, and I don't play much anymore. It's all about Ashtanga yoga right now.
Oh, it's all about yoga. Okay. I'm going to play tennis in a couple hours. I was captain of my tennis team, never all American like you, but still play twice a week. It brings me joy. Yoga brings you
Cool.
joy now. So I saw that, had to ask as a tennis player. So Max,
Definitely.
thank you again so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. As you heard, even with skyrocketing food prices, it's never been more important for our health and to that of the planet as well to buy organic foods. Our survival may just depend on it. Until next time, continue writing your own healing story.